is Christoph Mertens. I work for the International Data Spaces Association in Dortmund, Germany. I hope some of them are already aware of what we're doing. If not, I will give a 1-minute introduction in just a second. Before that, let me do some housekeeping. We will have a row of presentations. In case you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We also will have, at the end of our session today, at least 15 minutes to have a sort of panel, but also some time to get down to your questions that you might have had during the entire session. So please feel free to make use of the chat at any time. We want to welcome you to our session today, which is officially called AI Marketplace meets IDSA. AI Marketplace is one of the projects where IDSA is involved in, and we thought it would be a great idea to come together to talk about how data spaces allow AI to flourish in Europe and beyond. And this is basically also what we're up here for today. So let's have a quick look into the agenda. We will get some insights from Chris Langdon, Deutsche Telekom, into currently built data spaces. So we are aware of some of the greatest examples currently out there of data spaces that are built based on the IDS reference architecture. And Chris will give us some more insights into what is really happening out there, and also make the link to AI and how does that go together. Then Konstantinos Sipsas from Intrasoft will give a presentation about 2 R&D projects where we also involved. These projects are building marketplaces, and it will be interesting to see how they foresee to provide AI services to their users and to their ecosystems, even though they are not really AI-focused marketplaces. So this will be very interesting. And after that, we have a look right into AI marketplace. Please mute your microphones in case you're not speaking. Thank you. Then we have a look into the AI marketplace itself by Ruslan Bernijazov, who is also part of this project. So it will be great to see how an AI-based marketplace really works. And after that, Harrie Bastiaansen from TNO will show us a Dutch project that deals mainly with AI, and not only with one single marketplace, but really with an entire ecosystem. This will bring things together before we then go into our panel discussion. Before we have the first presentation of Chris, let's have a very quick view on the data spaces topic in general. So data spaces in context of IDS consist of certain components. So you as a user with your very own use case, you will need at least a connector in order to connect to the data space. But also a certain infrastructure is required. So you can imagine it like the internet, where you as someone who wants to use the internet, you need a router. This is our connector, but there also is a lot of infrastructure out there of that you are not really aware, but you make use of it. It starts with routers, but also usable infrastructure like search engines, etc. Same is true for data spaces here. And you can see that not only companies will be able to connect to these data spaces via connectors, but also marketplaces. We will see great examples, cloud services, and so on and so forth, all thanks to a connector. And this vision of a data space connects very well with the European strategy for data, where they talk about 9 verticals where they want to build data spaces. AI not being one of them, but I think we will see throughout the discussion and presentations today that this is fine, since AI is more or less a cross-cutting concern for all different domains. So, and this is something that we are not doing on our own. So building data spaces, building the reference architecture, creating standards is something that we do with more than 130 companies currently, which you can see here on the slides. And it's really a community effort, because it's not only about creating something that is good, but it's about something that is created under a common sense, where everyone who is part of the game agrees on the standards that we're creating. Without further ado, I would like to stop talking and give the floor to Chris Langdon, who will show us the first insights into existing data spaces. So Chris, I'll let you share your screen and stop sharing mine.
Yes, thank you very much, Christoph, there. I'm very grateful for the opportunity there. It's always a pleasure being able actually to present on our work with you guys. Quick question, do you guys see my screen? Is it possible to see my screen? Now I use the entire screen. Can you see my entire screen?
Perfect, you're good to go.
Beautiful, beautiful. So thanks again. It's an honor being here today. For full disclosure, I should mention I'm also the co-founder of the new IDS mobility community. That is an initiative that was started out of the IDSA, particularly the adoption program. We're very grateful actually that we were able to do this. So we'll have focused activities specifically on mobility, and that also links with my role at Deutsche Telekom. I'm in a unit that is called Deutsche Telekom IoT. We are focused on analytics solution in that space, and my responsibility is development in auto mobility. And what I'm going to talk today about is the relationship between data spaces built on IDS technology and AI, right? So why would anybody care actually, right? You know, why would anybody care about that particular relationship? So let me briefly talk about, you know, what is the problem actually, right? You know, why is that even of interest, right? You know, data spaces and AI. And then let me move on to suggestions how to do the right thing, which will ultimately lead to new infrastructure, and that's then closing the loop with IDS. So the key problem is that data analytics is a mess, right? You know, it's a chaos, right? It's not working from a business perspective, right? You know, how come I can make these accusations here? Well, just look at the time budget of data analytics project. What you see is more than 80% of the time is spent just dealing with the data. The rest is only results. So in essence, what we do is we're running the Pareto principle of business efficiency in reverse, right? And that is not possible. So something has to be done. Something has to be done, not so much on the AI side, but on the data side. And so Deutsche Telekom is focused on that. And I'm part of a product group and an offering that is called Data Intelligence Hub, and that's exactly what we do. So we try to fix data. And why is that so important, data? And that's a complicated diagram, but I want to bring out actually is that there are different types of AI. You know, we can distinguish between basically 3 different types of AI. The one is coming from statistics, the others from operations research, data mining, and then the third one is biocomputational explanations. And this is where you see neural networks for genetic algorithms. So a lot of the excitement lately that we've been seeing in the marketplace is coming from these type of applications. And those ones need, and that is the problem, lots and lots of data. Actually, they need more data than a single company typically has at its disposal. So the solution is to pool data, to consolidate data, to aggregate data. And you can have different directions. And I'm using this chart here to illustrate that for an AI application, it may be useful to get as much data as possible on a particular type of machine. And that machine may be deployed in many different industries. So what I need is I have to collect data horizontally across different industry systems on a particular type of machine in order to do some, for example, anomaly detection or preventative maintenance applications, right? All AI-based applications, because they need a lot of data. So the data that one company has typically is not sufficient to do it. Another version is where I maybe have to link up data entire supply chain, right? I literally have to connect with all the participants in the automotive business, the OEMs, the tier 1s, and then of course tier 2s and down to, you know, small and medium-sized companies. Or I want to actually complement existing data that I have with other data, for example, right? You know, in mobility, right? Of course, usage of transportation is weather dependent, for example, right? To tease out relationships, I need other people's data, and all that has to be consolidated. So, well, how do we do that? How do we do it right? Well, the right thing to do is actually to change fundamentally how we deal with data, right? You know, I often say that today we are 2% of all the data we will see in the next 15 years. So collecting the data, consolidating it literally in your house, in a database, in a data warehouse, and then maybe in a data lake, it's probably not the way to go. We do need a more distributed, federated data infrastructure. And something is around the corner, and this what's around the corner is coming under the label of Gaia X. It's a pan-European initiative to rethink data, to enable more applications in the upcoming data economy. And basically what is distinguished between the infrastructure layer and application space through a new set of services so that it is easier actually to share data. And this is now where those notions of data spaces and data market spaces are emerging. So if we look at our activities in our team, we're heavily involved in bringing this particular type of technology to market to enable, for example, data exchanges. And so we started out working with the technology IDS, then we've been involved in NPM. Out of NPM is a real lab activity in Hamburg, where we are creating the first minimal viable data space. Then Gaia X happened. We are also involved in Gaia X, and I will briefly talk about one project in particular, which is specifically focused at the intersection of Gaia X, that is data infrastructure, and artificial intelligence. So the idea is that we develop specialized tools in order to make it even easier to consolidate data horizontally, vertically. Then we're involved in other efforts where we're replacing the technology of the current national access point for mobility data in Germany. The EU requires that for member countries to do. We have currently a version. The next version will be based on IDS technology, and Deutsche Telekom, our team, is involved actually in implementing it. Then we're also involved in another new activity that is building. The German Chancellor at the end of last year asked the German auto industry to create data spaces, and she has been asking, and at the same time she's building a separate data space funded by the German government, and that is called data space, mobility data space, or Datenmobilität in Germany. We're also involved in this one. And then the last big project is an effort by the auto industry. Finally, the big German automotive companies have come together. Competitors have come together, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, and important tier ones, to create their own data space and data ecosystem in order to do what? And that's closing back up to what I had mentioned earlier, to literally link up data across the supply chain, right? So what we see currently is no longer just talk about IDS and the possibility actually that data sharing could enable AI. Now, what we see now is that companies are actively driving it, and they're driving it in this particular example vertically. The idea here is actually to link up, ideally, all the suppliers that feed into a particular part, and this example was a transmission set here. So that is actually happening. At the same time, we also have research projects going on, and that was the example that I mentioned earlier. That's a dedicated project, a Gaia X project, that is actually focused explicitly on Gaia X for artificial intelligence. It's part of a family of projects to address needs of the mobility sector. We are involved in this part, and in particular, we are running the component that is being tasked in that project to build out specifically data exchange, data sharing capabilities, give you a breakdown of what it is that we deal with in this particular project, while we're dealing with ontologies, language, that's like with human interaction, we speak the same language. And then we are focused on developing value-added services, right? So that indeed the user doesn't have to spend 80% of time anymore, wrangling with the data itself, but that we have dedicated applications, so-called basic applications, and then maybe even use case specific applications to relieve the data scientist, right, who should focus on the use case from data refinement activities. And then, of course, we have to link into existing data repositories, infrastructures, legacy system. That's the topic of data orchestration. Then we want to make it visible. We have already a working version. You can check it out at Datenmobilität. The Fraunhofer IEM has created a very beautiful data cockpit already. You can see the data flows literally between the different parties in this. We're going to build something here too in this particular project. And then most importantly is even you know, those data transactions, right, they're not happening in some, you know, empty space. No, they are typically managed by contracts. And so it has to be made sure that whenever we're talking about automated data transactions for AI, that they are compatible with particularly contractual agreements. And so we have also built this into this particular project. So that was in just 10 minutes, like a brief overview, actually. What's the problem that we try to address? We try to dramatically improve data productivity, which is required particularly for biocomputational AI methods. And it's not just talk. No, we're actively involved on two strings at least. The one is the government-funded R&D one, and the other one is with the industry, and that's specifically focused on, you know, creating vertical data chains. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you, Chris. That was pretty comprehensive and just in time. Thank you very much for this presentation and also for being with us. So I hope you got a notion about how important infrastructure and data spaces are for AI, but also for general access to data. And I think, Chris, you said it, like currently we only have a look at 2% of the data that we will see in the upcoming years. And data lakes and maybe also marketplaces will not be the solution to solve that and to get to the 100%. Still, marketplaces, of course, are important. Marketplaces are the way current business is made. So I really would like to have some insights now from Konstantinos Sipsas from Intrasoft into two examples from research, how marketplaces and data spaces interact in order to make the transition from current world towards the future that Chris now elaborated on. Kostas, you should be able
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you see my screen?
Absolutely. If you put it to presentation mode, yeah, perfect.
Okay. So hello, everyone. My name is Konstantinos Sipsas. I work for Intrasoft International, and we are involved in building marketplaces using IDS. So in our two R&D projects, Market 4.0 and DOM 4.0, that are focusing on the manufacturing domain. So today, mainly I will talk about these two projects, how we approach our marketplaces, how we use IDS, how we try to connect these two projects together. And of course, I will be coming from a perspective of IDS and marketplaces rather than AI, but I'll try to make some connections. So our two projects, Market 4.0, been running for quite some time now. It started back in 2018. We as Intrasoft are leading this project, and we're working together with several partners from around Europe. And our second project, DOM 4.0, is being coordinated by CMCL from the UK. We as Intrasoft are a partner of the project, and we're trying to bring in the results from Market 4.0. So let's see what these two projects are about. So Market 4.0 is developing an open multi-sided digital platform for enabling production equipment and service providers to connect and work together with manufacturing companies. It also creates trust in the manufacturing business-to-business collaboration. On the other hand, DOM 4.0 aims at developing a comprehensive industrial data ecosystem aligned with the open science and open innovation objectives to enable sharing of business-to-business data for the purpose of path generation and creation of new or enhanced products, processes, and services. Then let's go a bit into the details of Market 4 to understand what we are trying to do with Market 4.0. So we are actually building a platform here to support the interaction between our supply and demand side. So on our supply side, we have companies that are production equipment suppliers, manufacturing on-demand suppliers, and engineering services suppliers. And on the other side, the demand side, we have manufacturing OEMs, tier suppliers, and system integrators. So Market 4.0 marketplace is offering services to help this types of companies to connect with each other, search for equipment and services, test and simulate some of these offerings in the marketplace, make bids towards purchasing this kind of equipment and services, and of course compare and get feedback. In order to further facilitate this interaction and also extend our marketplace, we have come up with this concept of Market 4.0 apps that are based on IDS. And these apps further facilitate interaction by providing functionalities such as virtual and augmented reality, simulation, collaboration, and so on. Let's see some more details about how we approached the design of our marketplace and how we use IDS in more detail. So our marketplace looks like a typical marketplace. So you have all the functionalities for data logging, ordering, payment and billing, order management, user management. We also offer a kind of app store for our Market 4.0 apps. And of course, all this functionality is available to our users, be they suppliers or customers, or even developers, through a web interface or a website if you prefer. So this is the main entry point for our marketplace. And then as soon as the suppliers and the customers are trying to make business together, they have this need to start exchanging data that are more private in nature, and they cannot be on a public platform. And of course, these companies would also like to have control over how their data is used and shared with any other site. So this is where our Market 4.0 apps come in that rely on the IDS ecosystem to enable these exchanges of information, maybe share the CAD files that are required for this business transaction and so on. So we use this IDS ecosystem to provide a framework for secure exchange of data between our suppliers and customers. We also made the decision to keep, even though we are developing some IDS components in our project, we made the decision to keep this interface a bit, this ecosystem, sorry, separate from our platform, because we felt that this ecosystem will further grow outside of our purposes, and we will be able to connect with other companies that participate in the ecosystem out of Market 4.0 context, and we will be able to use some of the data that are available there, or even our data could be of use in some other companies. And this is how we make a connection to DOM 4.0, where we're trying to build a marketplace of marketplaces, bringing together different data sources. One, of course, is the manufacturing equipment domain, but there are others, as you can see at the bottom, so materials, marine and environment, and so on. So what DOM is trying to do is bring together all this data, push it through its technology stack, and convert it from data and information to knowledge and intelligence that is useful for the companies that are the data owners, and maybe some companies that are interested in the outcome of this processing. Of course, the technology stack will be using different kinds of technologies. And of course, that artificial intelligence could be here one technology that is used to process all these data sources. In essence, we're trying to connect Market 4.0 and DOM 4.0 to integrate the IDS ecosystem that we already have, at least our small, let's say, part of the IDS ecosystem, and allow the Market 4.0 stakeholders to share their data with the DOM ecosystem. And we are hoping that this will enable new use cases outside the typical supplier-customer interaction that we have in Market 4.0. And of course, we will be looking on how to integrate tools and services coming from the DOM platform and different developers with data coming from the IDS ecosystem. Finally, some conclusions from our work. So Market 4 and DOM look to unlock the data value in the IDS ecosystem. The data used for facilitating the production equipment procurement will now become available to different stakeholders and can be used for different purposes: production optimization, environmental footprint identification optimization, and so on. We will be tackling issues with data interoperability and the challenges of connecting tools and services with the IDS ecosystem. And of course, as this data become available to different stakeholders, all kinds of use cases become possible, including AI applications. So thank you for your attention, and back to you, Chris.
Kostas, thank you very much for these insights. So I hope with that you got a better feeling about how marketplaces and IDS data spaces can interact. So with the connector really at the core of interoperability here. What I really like about this project or projects is that they do not only care about the marketplace itself and the services they want to provide, but also about the entire data space infrastructure we've already talked about a bit. So this marketplace really will be enabled to run in data spaces, and also we have experiments here in these projects that showcase that this will be possible. So a very interesting look into the future, how this will run in the arising data spaces at the market, like mobility data space that we saw earlier from Chris. Thanks, Kostas, again. Now I think it's time to have a look into another marketplace example, but this time one that really focuses on AI. The services that the marketplace that we now will see by Ruslan will provide are AI services for the area of product creation. And let's see if we already can notice maybe differences, or maybe it's the equal approach, but only focus on AI. I'm really curious to hear more about it. Ruslan, stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christoph. I will also share my presentation.
We already can see you, which is good. And now also
great.
You're good to go.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Ruslan Bernijazov. I'm a research associate with the Fraunhofer Institute for Mechatronic System Design. And yeah, I would like to give you an overview of the research project AI Marketplace, in which we develop the platform AI Marketplace, which is supposed to be a digital platform for AI in product creation. And this basically means that we address three main aspects in our project. First of all, of course, product creation as our application domain, artificial intelligence as the technology that we are promoting and using, and then, of course, also the aspect of digital marketplaces, since we want to build a digital platform as the central, as a supporting unit for the ecosystem for AI and product creation. And before I go into the details of how this will look like, I would like to just shortly summarize the main motivation why we think such a platform makes sense. And the reason is that because of the digitalization of the whole product creation process, we have a lot of engineering data available in the scope of this process. And this makes, this is of course great input for the application of AI. And this is actually what we also see in industry companies. So there are a lot of potentials, but they are not completely being exploited as of now. And one of the main reasons is that industry companies usually lack access to AI expertise, so it's hard to assess how to use AI in the scope of product creation. And another main issue here is, of course, the data security, data privacy, data governance, because usually it's really critical data that companies are not willing to share with unknown AI providers. And on the other hand, we see that because there is this lack would say, trust, so that the AI providers do not have access to the data structures of product creation, do not have access to, for example, test data, training data, and so on. There is also a lack of AI solutions for product creation on the market. And this basically motivates us to create a platform that brings together these two roles. And we want to build this platform in 4 development stages. As of now, we have the first development stage, intelligent matching, already in a first beta version up and running. And here the focus is on just providing, just matching different partners, bringing partners together. So community building is the main focus here. And now what we are currently working on is the whole aspect of data exchange. So we want to provide additional data services in order to support the development and also the deployment of AI solutions for product creation. And finally, we want also to extend our services to support also the direct exchange of AI applications and even modular building blocks that can be used to develop new AI applications. Yeah, and I want also to visualize this on a small example. It's a rather generic example, but I think it captures pretty well what the main focus of the AI marketplace is. So for the first development stage, our main focus is this matchmaking. So we have an industry company with a problem, we have an AI provider with technology solutions, and now we want to bring fitting partners together so that they can develop AI applications for product creation. However, this usually involves a variety of follow-up processes and steps. So basically, the industry company has to provide data to the AI provider. The AI provider has to train the application to develop, to optimize the application based on this data, and finally also to provide this application to the customer. And as already mentioned, this is one of the main issues because this involves a lot of trust, usually also involves a lot of contracts between the different parties. And for this reason, we want to extend our services in a second and third development stage to also support, to provide services for data and traffic management. And the idea here is basically that we get the data from the industry company. So here the amount of trust is reduced to trusting the AI marketplace with the data. We get the AI application provided by the provider, and the AI marketplace provides services to train, to deploy the application, and basically the AI provider only gets the data that is really necessary in order to understand the general structure, but maybe not the full data set with the internal information of the industry company. And now, of course, the question is, how does the IDS ecosystem, the whole idea of data spaces fit into this? And this actually fits into this data connection part. So for stage 2 and 3, we rather focus on just direct upload of data via either just a graphical user interface or an API to the AI marketplace. And what we want to support in the fourth development stage is to exchange data via the IDS ecosystem. And the main arguments here are, first of all, an increased amount of trust, but also the connectivity and the possibility to connect to other data spaces and to do this via the IDS ecosystem. And so the final architecture, it's actually, or at least the high-level architecture, it's actually quite similar to the Market 4.0 architecture that Kostas just presented. So we have on the left side this traditional stakeholder network who can connect via APIs, via user interfaces to our AI marketplace and upload data and so on. But additionally to this, at least for the first and fourth development stage, we also include the IDS connector, which allows us to connect to the IDS ecosystem and allows customers to utilize the IDS technology in order to exchange data with the AI marketplace. Okay, and I hope this gives you an idea of how this is supposed to work and how our idea of the marketplace is. And currently we are working on this second development stage, so developing a first version of the data exchange capabilities and data services. And yeah, besides the technical aspects, we also develop a variety of community services and provide community services. And if you're interested in the general project or also the services, please just visit our webpage or our Twitter account. Okay, and yeah, so thank you very much for the attention. I want to close with an overview of the involved partners who are actively developing the AI marketplace or also supporting the AI marketplace. And now I want to hand over back to you, Christoph.
Thank you so much, Ruslan, for these interesting insights. So maybe we have a discussion afterwards in the short panel and Q&A part. But I think really we got a notion about how marketplaces can be part of the key towards the transition from traditional business towards data space driven business. Thanks so much. Our next speaker is already on stage here. Harrie, good to see you. Good to have you with us. Now that we saw two examples of marketplaces, one not AI agnostic, but not focusing on AI, the other one focusing on AI. And at the beginning, the warming by Chris about AI in general and marketplaces that are built for the market just right now. I really would like to see what our Dutch colleagues with the Netherlands AI Coalition are doing, and where they bring together all the different aspects. So marketplaces, one solution, infrastructure, AI services. So Harrie, I'm really looking forward to see how you're dealing with the topic. So stage is yours. We can see your screen and also you.
Okay, thank you, Christoph, for the introduction. Yes, I'm going to tell you something about what we are doing in the Netherlands on the AI Coalition and how we're proceeding on that, and also the role of IDS in there. My name is Harrie Bastiaansen. I work for TNO. TNO is comparable to the German Fraunhofer Institute, but I work a lot for the Dutch AI Coalition. So let me see. Why doesn't it proceed my screen? Okay. Yeah, the contents, only a few topics to cover. What is a Dutch AI Coalition? How do we address the topic of data sharing, but also outlook on the things that we are going to do in the coming period of time. The Dutch AI Coalition, it has started a year and a half ago approximately to stimulate AI in the Netherlands. Both the AI, but also parts of it that are needed to get AI really adopted in the Netherlands. So currently there are about 400 organizations that take part in the Dutch AI Coalition, and they have a working structure in which they, in the vertical direction, distinguish application areas. So where are we going to focus on if we make AI available in a better manner in the Netherlands? So the application areas, you typically see the sectors. They also identified a set of 5 building blocks. Building blocks are things that are independent from these application areas and that we are going to develop across these sectors. There are a few soft ones, human capital. We need sufficient people in the Netherlands that have knowledge on what AI is and really the details how it works, that kind of thing. There's also the social acceptance, ethical frameworks of AI, because of course it also gets a lot of attention if it goes wrong in the media. The thing that we are going to address in this presentation, but also the work that I'm involved in, is called the data sharing part. Data sharing is, I don't have to explain you, is a really driver for adoption of AI, and not only within sectors, but also across sectors. And that's why they said data sharing should be a separate building block to be developed for the Dutch AI Coalition across sectors. We made quite an ambitious plan for the coming 4 years till the end of 2024 in what we call building a trust framework for AI data sharing. How are we going to enable AI data sharing to be used for AI across sectors and for sectors, and how are we going to do that? So at a high level, we defined a roadmap on how to do that, and their funding has been made available for the coming 6 years to work on it. But you see the plan at this moment is for 4 years to do so. We did a market analysis as part of our data sharing working group for the Dutch AI Coalition on what is already there and how do we proceed, and already there with respect to data sharing. And you see on the right-hand side the picture, there are already a lot of data sharing initiatives going on. These are mainly in the Netherlands, meaning that you don't build an infrastructure from scratch. There's already going on a lot of approaches on data sharing, and you should come up with, if possible, an approach to go along with that, the things that are already there. But what you also can see is that there are many siloed initiatives, meaning that it's specific for a specific sector, for the logistics or for the health or other sectors. And the third one that we see is that there are currently many agreement framework approaches that's comparable to iShare, that's working together with the IDSA, in which a common agreement is made on data sharing, perhaps in combination with authorizations structures on where can you use the data for. A real infrastructure, or like the IDSA is providing for also doing the enforcement of the data sharing policies and building data apps on top of it, is mainly missing. As part of the that market scan, my colleagues also looked at what are the initiatives, and there were a few main conclusions. There's not a single solution yet that fully exploits all the things we need for AI data sharing. FIRA and IDS have been identified as a good way to go forward with a major chance of successful future adoption of it. So that's why we also said we are going to proceed with IDS to build these infrastructures. We identified several topics that identifying that what are the main challenges if you are talking about data sharing for AI. I see there's still a spelling error in there. I will correct it before I distribute these sheets. One of the things that we identified is that when you talk about data sharing for AI, that we also want to support various collaboration models, meaning that it's not always the case that you want to share the data with a third party that is doing the AI algorithm, but there are methods like federated learning, secure multi-party computation, and in that area that enable you to process the data in the domain of the data provider without having to share the sensitive data at all. So it's not anymore about data sharing, but providing access to data for these AI models. So these collaboration models in which you say, we not always are going to share the data with third parties that are doing the AI processing, is the other way around, opening up your infrastructure to provide access to the data, and let things like multi-party computation or federated learning use your data without the sensitive data to be shared at all. Data sovereignty is quite important. Trust in the AI system, quite important. Transparency, conformity, and compliance. So what we did is we had several architectural principles defined on how are we going to build this infrastructure for data sharing. I won't go through all of them, but there are 3 ones that I would like to address. First of all, this is one that I said, enabling locally executing data apps. So allowing the data to be processed in the domain of the data provider, meaning that you can do things like federated learning, MPC locally, so that you don't have to share the data at all. So it's providing access to the data. It's then instead of data sharing. We said we built a reference architecture on top of IDS, and interoperability is really key. We are aiming for AI data spaces, but we would like to have the AI working across these data spaces. So interoperability between these data sharing domains for AI is a design approach that we take from the start into account. Something on the role model. This is the well-known IDSA role model, also presented before. We tailored it to the needs of AI. I won't go into the detail. So this is the role model that we are currently developing for large-scale AI data sharing for AI in the Netherlands. It may look different from IDS, but still in essence it is IDS, but then tailored for the roles that we foresee for this AI application area. What we did last year, in 2020, we built 3 proof of concepts, identifying separate parts on what do we need for data sharing for AI. One is on this distributed collaboration models, so bringing the algorithm to the data, things like federated learning and NPC, how it works. One on flexible permission management, getting the permissions to be allowed to share data at all. That especially applies to privacy sensitive data. How are we going to do that? And we also see, and that's the right-hand POC, you have to work in an environment in which there are already a lot of data sharing initiatives in there. So what we said is, how does it going to work if you are going to elaborate that in this environment where there are already existing data sharing environments? How do they work together? Do we always need an IDS infrastructure, or can we also work together with other infrastructure that are not IDS? And that's what we call the hybrid infrastructure. And it also provides a migration trajectory on how to do so. And we built POCs on it in different sectors, one in the government sectors, one in the health sectors, and one in the energy sector. And you can see the work on it on the publicly available GitLab. So what are we going to, what are we currently working on? Based on the IDS approach and making it applicable for specifically for AI, looking at the design principles for data spaces like being defined within EU, for instance, the OPD project. We identified the basic building blocks, the basic structure that we foresee that these data spaces should have to support AI. And that ranges about, from the higher level scheme owner authority kind of functionality with the legal agreements, the onboarding schemes, also the data processing, an application execution environment, the relation with KI-X, but also for managing the semantics. And we have the data sharing building blocks, which is traditionally the focus of IDS, how we are going to do that. So currently the way that we are approaching it is that we have defined 2 development lines. One is for these individual data spaces that we are designing to support AI. We are further developing how does such a data space look like to make it suitable for AI, and what do you need from the IDS connectors to support these kind of things that we refer to as an intra-data space compatibility. So we're developing the functionality that is internally needed in the data spaces to support AI. That's one of the development tracks. The other one is, like we said, it's important that interoperability is taken into account from the start. So we're also spending quite a lot of effort in defining the interdata space interoperability approach. How are we going to make these data spaces interoperable with one another? For the first one, we are more or less defining a reference architecture that these current data spaces that exist can use if they want to migrate, evolve to such an AI-enabled data space. The second one will be more prescriptive, because if you will need interoperability, you really need to also agree upon interoperability standards that are needed in there. For the intra-data space, so we're looking at what functionalities are already there with the IDS having provided, but also what do we need on top of it to really support AI in a right manner. And then we're talking about things like how can we support federated learning, NPC, these locally executing AI algorithms by means of flow orchestration, app orchestration. We're doing that together with Fraunhofer also. How does the interworking with the processing, the application execution environment, the KI-X work, but also the interworking with the data sovereignty? How do you enforce then these policies that are coming from the data apps and the policy framework that you are defining? And we are looking at the evolution migration scenarios. How do you fit these architectures in the existing data sharing initiatives, that they have a migration trajectory to grow towards the support of AI. The other development track is on interoperability. And interoperability is quite a broad topic. You see a picture from the European interoperability framework. It covers not only technical parts, but also the semantics, the organizational, the legal aspects. You have to take that into account at all these levels to make these various AI data spaces interoperable, but they are quite important if you want to enable data sharing across sectors, across data spaces. So what we are currently doing, and I refer also to the work of the Data Sharing Coalition that has recently released a data sharing canvas on how are you going to develop an infrastructure for enabling interoperability between various data spaces. They are talking about the proxy model and an interoperability domain, an harmonization domain for interoperability. And for all these data space building blocks, like also defined in the European Open Day Design Principles document, they are looking how does it look like if you are going to interconnect it at each of these levels. It's quite a big effort, but it's quite also an important effort. And the challenging part of course, is it will really work if this harmonization domain, these standards, these protocols that are suggested are being standardized. And that may still take a lot of time to get that done within Europe or perhaps even globally. But that's the longer vision that we are aiming for.
Harrie, I think you are going towards the conclusion anyhow, but it would be great to have some time for the discussion with the others also.
Yeah, so this is my last sheet. There are some publications available. Just look at it.
Great. Thank you so much. Maybe before getting to the first questions, let the others also join the stage. Ruslan, Kostas, Chris is already here with us. Join stage so we can have some questions. For all the other people in the audience, if you're not shy, feel free to join us here on stage. Otherwise, put your questions into the chat. That's also an option. I already can see one question here that is very concrete and goes towards Kostas. So Kostas, which kind of connectors did you already use in the both projects? So I think more Market 4.0 since it's more advanced.
Yes, I will try to provide some explanations. So for Market 4.0, the short answer is that we have been building our own connector. It has been built by engineering. Probably most of the people here will have heard of engineering. They are a member of IDSA as well. We are in close collaboration with the association in order to be sure that our connector is compatible with all the specs that are available. We have gone through several versions as the updates of the information model and the architecture are being released. And we have, of course, been testing it with several use cases, both from inside the project and with our open calls. For DOM 4.0, we are at the beginning of the project. We are still in the discussions, but for me, what would be interesting is that we adopt another kind of connector and we try to see if we have the compatibility that is required for the two connectors, the Market 4 connector and the one that has been applied in DOM, but this is a work in progress.
Thank you very much. And then I have one question towards Harrie, basically, or into the round. But Harrie, you talked about harmonization of different data spaces, even those who are not IDS based. And also one aspect was very interesting. You elaborated a lot on AI-specific changes that you made to the role model in this concrete case, but to the IDS approach. Still sticking to it and being compliant, but what I really would like to know is, do you think that the other data spaces and projects that you now heard of, will they be ready for AI, or do the data spaces miss currently something and should change the way of proceeding currently?
It is of course difficult for me to say. what we see happening, and that's for us an important driver in developing the IDS part of the infrastructure and the data apps that we need in there and the interactions with the Gaia X is especially these parts on data sovereignty and preventing from data share to be shared at all. For instance, we do a lot together with the health sector, the medical part, and they are so hesitant to share data with third parties, doing things like analysis of CT scan pictures and that kind of thing. They don't allow the data to be shared at all. So they are really going for architectures like personal health, train, federated learning. We see these things now also being adopted in other sectors. They were driven in the Netherlands by the health, but we see these concepts now also going to other sectors. For us, it's also one of the most difficult cases. If we can handle that one, we are also confident that we can handle, simply said, the simpler cases in which we are going to share data with a third party. So we are more or less preparing for the worst case. And that's why we address this complex situation on how are you now going to build your IDS connectors, that they are ready for large-scale federated learning, MPC, that you can do the orchestration of the apps. But then coming back to your question, we are preparing for the worst case. We hope, of course, that there's a gradual evolution trajectory, that many sectors start with more simpler cases. We are going to share the data with third parties that do the AI analysis, but we keep the migration path open. So we will do both. And I think then for your question, no, I don't think they don't do I don't think they do the wrong things, but ours are more behind data sharing. It's also about providing controlled access to data, not sharing the data at all. So also think about this trajectory to the more complex cases that you really data sharing. And support all of them in the end. It's a complex environment. You cannot choose the one or the other.
Maybe let's reverse the question towards maybe Chris or also Kostas, since Ruslan, you are already dealing with AI anyhow. But Chris, Kostas, do you feel ready for AI? Is it that you for the data spaces that you reported about, Chris, for instance, do they deal actively with AI as a topic, or is it just a side mark, one of many services?
I mean, if I may, I can just say, so I mean, I can speak about the mobility space, and we're involved in various efforts there. We have some efforts, the Gaia X for KI, for example, that is more driven, you could say, more from a research perspective. Now, what we've learned is actually this: it's got to be a yin and yang setting, typically, push or pull, so to speak, right? You do need industry involvement, you know? It is just crucially important, really, because, you know, we all know it. In the lab, you can come up with anything, essentially, right? You know, what is the optimization? Is it throughput time? Is it reliability? Proportion of results, right? But ultimately, there got to be something that'll work out in an existing system. You're not creating an industry system from scratch, right? So that's what we learned, actually. And so therefore, we are also involved in different projects, like the Catena X project, right, where the auto industry has come together to drive its own, right? So they even use different vehicles, actually, to move ahead. So I think the critical thing is actually to link up the dots, connect the dots, actually, you know, to make sure that we can actually provide, you know, new ideas, you know, innovation, new technology capabilities into the industry stream and see how that does, and then take, you know, problems maybe into the research stream. That's kind of the, you know, think about it as a cycle, you know, that's how the cycle that we operate, how we use the different different projects. The X for KI, more the problem solving, whereas then on the other side we help them, to your point, adopting an industry environment, and then find the next hurdle and feed that back into a more research-related effort, right?
Yeah, and I agree with you. And for instance, we learned a lot about this. If you're really going to operationalize these concepts in a real medical environment, going behind the firewalls of hospitals, what you run into, and everything can be solved, but it's always more difficult than do it in a research environment. So I agree with you completely. I am convinced that by doing these exercises, a lot of knowledge can be exchanged from one sector to another, and you reuse the components that are being built. And
look, yeah. I am involved in IDSA, right? And so you should take it as it is. But I can say, wonderful that we have IDSA to literally do that, connect the dots, actually. I think that is a critical exercise, particularly at the stage where the market is, right? So you do have new technology that comes online. You have regulation at a high level, you know, the European Data Governance Act, for example, you know, there's an open discussion. How should the proposal, you know, be finalized? There is a Digital Markets Act coming. So we have regulation, you have technology capabilities. And so I do think actually that IDSA plays a fundamental role here in connecting the, you know, the sides. So,
Chris, even though I really would like to continue the discussion, and also Ruslan and Kostas, I really would like to ask you some more questions. I think time is over for us now, but with the final statement that you gave, so connecting the dots, I really would like to shout out to everyone here listening to us. Let us build data spaces, but let us make also sure that we build on common design principles. And IDSA, we as an association are not providing the solution to everything only. It's more. It's like we invite everyone to the table to co-create the standard, to co-create these design principles. And this is, I think, what is most important, that we have places where we can meet and discuss about the things that are still open, about the things that are already there, to change them, to make them better, to improve. And this is really what I would like to do with everyone out there. And we are going into a summer break. Sorry. We're going into a summer break, but we'll be back for more sessions, more Q&As. I think there will be more questions in the future. So we have a Q&A session on September 2nd, where you can join freely, have a look at our webpage to register there for free. And yeah, bring us your questions. We hope to be able to answer them. And also an open consultation hour mid-September. These are the next touch points where you can join us, ask questions, get into discussions. And for now, I would like to thank again Harrie, Chris, Kostas, and Ruslan for your great presentations and insights. Have a wonderful summertime. See you back soon, and goodbye, everyone.